Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name's Pastor Siri. I'm a Lutheran pastor and a spiritual seeker, and today on the channel we are looking at some pride memes. Pride memes can be really fun. They can be really supportive. They can also be really bad, and we're going to be looking at a little bit of both, and along the process you're going to learn a little bit about good and bad theology. So here we go. As we get started, we have a couple memes right away that address the topic of pride in general. There's been criticism in the conservative community that points out that pride is a sin and therefore you shouldn't be proud, and there's just a lot of ways in which people want to throw darts at the LGBTQ community. And by the way, throughout the video, I might use LGBTQ plus community or queer community. Everybody feels something different and is more comfortable. There's gender and sexual diverse community. I'm still learning that people will identify and feel more comfortable using different terms. So forgive me if I use one that isn't your favorite. I'm trying to continue to learn along that process. But here we go. We're going to get started. So first one, pride is just one of the deadly sins. How many of the other ones will you use to defend pride? So this is coming from the 7 deadly sins, which, by the way, comes from church history, not from the Bible. Either way, it's just a thing, along with lust and gluttony and things like that. What I find interesting about the criticism of pride is that this particularly comes, in my opinion, from a masculine point of view. So pride, there's 2 ways we look at pride, let's be honest. One is sort of this theological idea where we equate ourselves with God, or we think that we're so special. It's very egotistical, narcissistic perspective in which we see ourselves as better than others. We're trying to put ourselves in the position of God. And then there's another perspective altogether. It's just like, we use this all the time. Oh, I'm so proud of you, son. Or I'm really proud of the work I did on that. Very few people find an issue with using proud in that way. You know, a 2-year-old ties their shoes for the first time, or a 4-year-old or whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. Good job. Nobody says, stop. You shouldn't say that. Like, you shouldn't be proud of anything you do. If you do, you do not understand the basic principle of self-esteem and how absolutely necessary that is in order to live in this world. So back to the theological perspective, though. This comes from this idea that pride in general, capital P pride, is this perspective that humans have of being like God, being better than God. And yes, that is not great when you think yourself as better than others, very narcissistic point of view. It's not part of the healthy, collaborative, communal, give and take, relational world that we should have, along with the humility that human beings should have, that we're still learning, we're still growing, and we're not God. We have incomplete information, which, by the way, that alone should make people who are condemning the gay community and the LGBTQ community pause. But I digress. Traditionally, women have not been the perpetrators of this kind of pride. Often they have been denied, along with other marginalized communities. They have been denied the ability to even think of themselves worthy, let alone being narcissistic enough to see themselves as God. So it has been argued theologically that some people in positions of power think of themselves as being too much, but people in marginalized communities who have been the subject of a lot of harassment and have often had their voices taken away, this is not an issue for them. So by definition, this kind of feels like a masculine problem, but I digress. If we're actually looking at the opposite of pride, from just a generic point of view, it is a sense of shame and unworthiness, which is not a good place to start out from. People who actually suffer from shame and unworthiness and feel that they're not good enough and that they are not enough, these are people who struggle in daily life. They struggle with relationships, they struggle with friendships and marriages, they struggle with living with themselves. This is a huge spiritual wound. And it is to no one's advantage for people to be walking around with that deep of a spiritual wound. So we're going to continue to look at this theme with this next meme. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. I love naked pastor comics. So here's a person with happy pride, again, claiming the ability that it is okay for you to be proud of yourself. It's okay for you to love yourself rather than to think poorly of yourself and to come into this world with low self-esteem, begging for any sort of human rights and basic rights in your life. And so this person is just simply saying, happy, proud, I am part of the queer community and I deserve to be able to think of myself as a full human being, deserving love, deserving good things in life. And then the person who, by the way, is happy saying, proud American, proud dad, proud Christian, proud patriot, proud this, has the gall to say, don't you know that pride is a sin? This is exactly the hypocrisy that I was trying to name earlier, that people will not distinguish between a theological masculine pride of thinking that you're God and this generic ability to view yourself and your accomplishments in a good light, that everyone deserves that. In fact, it is psychologically healthy to do that. But yet, when somebody's trying to feel good about themselves and say, look, I don't feel worthless. I don't feel ashamed of who I am. I feel proud of who I am and I feel proud of my accomplishments. Then homophobic people turn around and say, don't you know pride is a sin? And it is a theological abuse against that person. And this can be used usually against marginalized communities. So it's been used against the queer community, and this has been used against women. It's been used against any group of people whom the dominant group feels should stay in their place, should know their place. And the minute they start to get ideas about how good or smart or competent they are, majority group will find a way religiously and theologically to attack them with scripture and theology. And that is pride. That is pride. That is the sin of pride, to actually think that you know better about this person's worth in the world than God does, than they do. That is sinful. Next one also comes from the naked pastor. I love this one, where this person who's got a car with stickers all over about be born again and turn or burn, just very conservative evangelical bumper stickers, says, I'm sick of you shoving your agenda down our throats. There is, again, a lot of hypocrisy that you can see in people criticizing the LGBTQ community, as they are simply trying to live without hiding, without being closeted, and just to be themselves, which might mean occasionally wearing a t-shirt that says I'm proud or rainbow or holding hands with their loved one. By the way, heterosexual, cisgender people are free to do that at any point that they want to, all the time. But when the queer community wants to live their life in the same way with the same privileges as heterosexual, cisgender people, we will often get really upset and be like, oh, you're shoving it in my face. You are making it your whole personality. And by the way, activists often have had to find in the past that they do have to overstate and make stands and be very vocal and obvious about who they are just to be noticed. And it does upset people for a while, but it starts to stir the pot so that people talk about whatever that new agenda perspective situation is, so that eventually some conversation is had and people's minds and hearts can be changed. So there are, yes, some times in which activism will intentionally try to put things in your face, but someone walking down the street with a rainbow on their shirt, wanting to live their life or holding the hands of their loved one that just happens to not be the majority heterosexual relationship, is not putting it in anyone's face or making it all their personality. All right, this next one is hilarious. It's the Pride Month, which turns into demon. And this is meant to be a criticism. It's meant to say like, haha, look, the queer community, the LGBTQ community is like, it's demonic. The irony about this is that people have put this on shirts and claimed it. Just been like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm a demon. Haha, right? This to me is the same vibe as people who go, oh my gosh, God spells God, turn it around, DOG, and it's dog. Maybe God is a giant dog in heaven. You're just playing with language. You're playing with words. And in other languages, you could do other connections and you could make other things happen. This is a coincidence, but people are using it to display their homophobia, and it's just silly. It's silly. So why do people say pride in the first place? And here's the next one. Pride is important because someone tonight still believes they're better off dead than being gay. This is the problem. When you have an entire society that is very, very clear and uses so much language to say, this is what a man is, and this is what they look and act like, this is their gender role, and they're supposed to love women who, by the way, look and act in this little way as well. When you have that constrained of a society, anyone who doesn't fit in that starts to doubt that there's something wrong with them. And believe me, so many people who do not fit into those gender binary codes, even if it's a straight woman who just happens to be really smart and wants to do a lot of stuff with her life, doesn't want to stay home pregnant barefoot in the kitchen, a lot of times people who do not fit into that are going to start questioning if there's something wrong with them rather than something sick with the society. And oftentimes they've ended up on their knees praying to God, please allow me to force myself into this little pigeonholed box. And the truth is, that is not the way God made us. God has made all of creation incredibly diverse. And we just look out in nature, talk to a biologist, talk to a sociologist, people who've studied cultures around the world, and you will see that the perspective of the culture that we've grown up with, me in the United States, is very small. And rigidly forcing people into our cultural expectations is a recipe for disaster. In that way, people can have deep mental health issues of, like I said, self-worth issues, thinking there's something deeply wrong with them, feeling unloved, feeling like they're going to be kicked out of their church community, they're going to be kicked out of their family and homeless on the street tonight if they try to come out. This is not okay. This is not what God wants at all. God wants all people to love themselves, love God, love their neighbor, and thrive. And that as community, as people together, there is enough room for us in our full diversity to be able to live and thrive together. And so, yes, that's why we have pride. That's why even allies, people like myself, who's heterosexual, cisgender, I will wear a lot of pride gear during the month so that people who are in the queer community will see that they're safe with me, that there is someone who will advocate for them, someone who thinks they're a human being who deserves to have good things in life. All right, the next one isn't technically a meme, but this is what I'm talking about, is like, this is a anti-gay protest that is just vitriolic hate. I mean, look at the all words in caps, bright letters, bright colors. How dare anybody ever say, in the name of God, I declare that you are hated? That is pride. That is the gross, sinful pride, to be able to step in the place of God and to say to another human being that you are hated by God. I would never say that to anyone. There are people who I believe are destructive in this world, who are doing really, really horrible things on a large scale basis, people in politics and people who are running countries. But I would never say that God hates them. I would say that their behavior is hated by God, but I would not say that God hates them. But that's a whole nother topic. And so this vitriolic hate that conservatives have often put against the LGBTQ plus community is why we have to have a Pride Month, and why allies like myself have to step up to show that there are people who are Christians who do not believe this nonsense. Next one is the same thing. So this is a picture of 3 white males in suits who look like they came right out of church, whacking a person with a rainbow shirt to death with the Bible. And the caption is, if you're using the Bible to hurt other people, you're using it wrong. And the quote from Romans 13 is, love does no harm to its neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. Now, I understand that conservative people who believe that it's wrong to be gay and that God made men men and women women, which is a very simplistic belief, by the way, that you think you're helping. You think that you're saving gay people and trans people from hell by basically making them feel so ashamed of themselves and isolated and alienated that they will pray themselves into being different than they are. And this is the basis of conversion therapies and other sorts of things like that attempt to force people into what's the acceptable American Christian conservative binary, which is totally bogus theologically, biblically, culturally, sociologically, biologically. It's ridiculous. But using shame and using guilt and fear and damnation to try to force people to change, that's like the worst way to ever make anyone do anything. Secondly, if it worked, everybody would be straight. But it doesn't work, because when you are born that way, that is how you're going to be, and you cannot change a way that you are born. Can't do it. So I can sit here and meditate and pray to God that my hair will turn red, and I'm sure I prayed for that when I was 8 years old because I loved redheads. But guess what? Still a blondie. Homophobic Christian, hates LGBTQ people. Meanwhile, Jesus. It is really important to realize that while they didn't have the same language that we do now, there would have been knowledge in Jesus' time within the Jewish community as well as in the larger world, and there was a lot of cross-pollination happening with trade routes and whatever. People knew about other religions and other cultures. So the idea of like gay people and men living together and women living together and even they wouldn't have used the word transgender, but there would have been people who were other gendered in that time. People were aware of that. And yet, in all of his years of ministry, Jesus never says anything about the LGBTQ community. In fact, Jesus always stands on the side of those who are subverting cultural norms. And the one I keep going back to over and over again is Mary of Bethany, who in Luke 10, she wants to sit with the male disciples and listen to Jesus' feet. She wants to do what males are doing. And yet, when Martha, her sister, wants her to come into the kitchen to do the womanly thing and asks Jesus to enforce that gender role on Mary, he refuses to do so. I think that's really powerful. There's another passage in which Jesus talks about eunuchs, which has been a little confusing to people. But again, eunuchs were an other gendered person. Whether they chose to be eunuchs or whether they were forced to be eunuchs, they were often excluded from the community. And yet Jesus uses them as an example of faith. And that's really, really powerful that Jesus again and again subverts the desire to look down on people because of the way they are. That rather community is about faith, and it's about the way we work and treat with one another. It is not about forcing people to behave and look in certain ways that make us comfortable. Here's this next one. Again, you've got a guy holding up a Bible, and he's got signs, repent or burn, what would Jesus do, sinner turn back, trying to use fear, shame, and guilt to force people to behave, live, be different than they are is not a good tactic. And here's Jesus going, I forgive you, walking by with a pride flag. And I like this because I do think that Jesus forgives our ignorance. I do think that Jesus forgives us for being closed-minded and small-minded. It would be really good if we could figure that out and educate ourselves and listen to people. One of the things I see often that bothers me is that Christians have this thing that we sometimes think we know everything about everything. We can be very superior about our beliefs and not listen to marginalized communities who have been harmed by the Bible, by our theology, who just need to be listened to and may have a different perspective. And so if it's about the Bible or really about anything, often Christians think they have it all figured out. And that, again, is incredibly arrogant. It's not humble. It's not open-hearted. And there's a lot that we are going to, when we die and meet Jesus or whatever you believe, we're going to see all the ignorant, hurtful, cruel, close-minded, close-hearted things we said and did and go, oh, I feel so bad. I didn't know. And Jesus will be like, I know you didn't know. All right, the next one says, what if gays are part of God's plan to test the Christians if they'll really love one another? That's what I'm talking about. I do believe that Earth is difficult to live on because it forces us to grow, and God doesn't have to do anything to us, by the way. God's not testing us. Life is just testing. And in the process, I think God does send teachers our way and does send lessons our way for us to learn, and kind of waits to see, hey, are you going to figure this out? And we have the option to learn. We have the option to grow. We have the option to let our heart break for someone else. We have the option to make ourselves uncomfortable, to shift and change and metamorphosize inside into a more mature, humble, courageous, compassionate person, or not. And that choice continues every day of our lives, from the time we take our breath until the time we die. We have millions of opportunities to keep learning and growing. What if the diversity in our community, the different skin color, gender diversity, sexual diversity, neurodiversity, is God's way of asking us to realize how different we are, and that everyone can still be loved, instead of us trying to force people into rigid binaries and black and white systems that have never worked, don't work, aren't working, will not work. Next one, another naked pastor. Whoa, 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 the sheep says. Hold it right there. He wasn't lost. We kicked him out. I know. And I found her. Jesus with a transgender sheep. There is some basis to this, that sometimes in the animal kingdom, sheep, for example, will just arbitrarily decide that there is a sheep that they don't like. And so they will all push and shun that sheep out. And in this particular case, I feel like that's apt, that we as human beings in our foolishness will scapegoat people. We will find a member of the community that we don't understand, that makes us uncomfortable, puts us outside of our black and white thinking, and it's a lot easier, instead of asking questions and making ourselves uncomfortable and changing our worldview, we're just going to take that member of our community and push them out and scapegoat them and say, this person is the evil person. They're wrong because they're not like us. And I think we can see this all throughout human history, how this has been done. And looking back on history, very rarely have we made the right choice. Over and over again, communities have exiled, harassed, tortured, beaten, and imprisoned the vulnerable people. All right, last one. Pride has zero to do with who I sleep with, and everything to do with the fact that I survived you, your friends in school, family members, religious dogma, taught safe self-hatred, and am now tough enough to walk down the street in my own skin. Yeah, so again, pride is not to do with equating yourself with God or thinking you're better than other human beings. Pride has to do with being proud of who you are as a human being, knowing that you are loved just as you are, feeling that the contributions that you have to the world are worthy and important just as you are, that you don't have to change the way you look, act, or who you are down in your core in order to be loved. And I feel like the New Testament is so clear on that. Jesus is clear on that. The letters are clear on that, that love is the primary thing we should be focusing on. And that love is never the wrong answer. Listening, having empathy is not the wrong answer. Being arrogant and assuming you know everything and you've got nothing to learn, that you have it all figured out, that your interpretation of the Bible is 100% foolproof and correct. That is the definition of pride, and that's the only pride that I'm concerned about. So that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, well-meaning questions or ideas or thoughts, please let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.